What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Before we get started, I did want to jump in to let you know that unfortunately there will be some audio issues throughout this interview. Let me run it back for those who aren't local viewers of WECT here in Wilmington, North Carolina. A couple of weeks ago, the station had what I think could be accurately described as a catastrophic meltdown. Engineers worked through the middle of the night just to get us back on air, and even then we were limited in what we could do. Later that same day was my interview with Jeff, and while everything seemed okay at the time, it wasn't until after the fact that we noticed the audio was in pretty rough shape. Throughout our conversation, you'll hear some scratches and pops, and even worse, some words or phrases will be completely cut off. Jeff was kind enough to sit down with me briefly once more so I could put something together for broadcast. So if you're looking for a more polished experience, I encourage you to check out these two packages that cover Jeff's podcasting background, his book of limericks entitled Best Summed Up, a retrospective of the Totally Rad Show, and a preview of Predator Badlands. I'll put the links in the description below. And be sure to check out our other conversations like writer-comedian Mike Drucker chronicling his career in late-night television, storyteller Donna Washington explaining the Southern folklore on display in Xbox's South of Midnight, and Stacey Harper Bell going in-depth on her time in Disney's all-girl pop group Nobody's Angel. The full interviews, along with some additional breakout segments, can be found on YouTube in the WECT Digital Studio Presents playlist. Again, I apologize for the audio in this video, but if you've been listening to Jeff Cannata for as long as I have, I do think there's plenty to take away from this interview. And how many people are able to say that they were able to podcast with one of their favorite podcasters? So maybe this one is just for the diehards out there, but without further ado, my conversation with Jeff Cannata. Greetings and salutations. My name is Pachilis, and welcome to another interview from the WECT Digital Studio. I am joined today by a man who wears many hats: actor, podcaster, a man who has been a part of my viewing and listening pleasure for the last 15 years, one Mr. Jeff Cannata. Jeff, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to hear that I've grown old in front of your eyes.
I mean, time comes for us all, you know what I mean?
Indeed.
I mean, to talk about that for a little bit before we start going is that I started listening to you guys. I'll tell the story more in depth as we go along, but to think about how much my life has changed, like, I started listening to you before I met my current wife, long before I was married or had kids. I was, I want to say I was working as a cashier in Best Buy at the time. So you've been there for a lot of my life changes, and you know, I've been there for, you know, a lot of years. And one of the things I like about listening to your podcast is being able to not only hear the topics of the week, but, you know, getting a little bit of hint into, you know, your own personal life as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the beauties of the medium. It's, you know, it's almost redundant to talk podcasting now because everybody knows about it, but I've been doing it so long that we used to have to tell people what it was. And back in the day, you know, that was kind of one of the big selling points, is the level of intimacy that you kind of get medium. That's, you know, I think a little bit more than radio was, you know, I guess is, but barely is these days. But, and, you know, some traditional media where you're constrained by time, you're constrained by, you know, the format, but also because most of the time when people are listening podcast, they have the audio inside their ears. I mean, they're literally putting, you know, the earbud in their ears, and so it's a very, it's almost a close prox physically, where I'm right there talking in people's ears. So, you know, I think there is a level of familiarity that is born from that. That's one I really appreciate, and you know, don't try not to take for granted.
Right, and we are going to talk all about that. But first, you know what? I want to take it way back to the beginning. And so, but like, I know you as like a podcaster and, you know, a YouTuber, but you know, I'd like to talk about, I know that you have a background in theater and that you have My last person that I interviewed was a dancer who ended up moving to LA to pursue the dream of being a professional dancer and singer. And, you yourself also, you grew up in California, but you too, I'm assuming, moved to LA to pursue your dream of acting. Could you tell us a little bit about what that journey was like? Because I think with this interview and my last interview, I feel like it's important for people that have dream or aspire to just throw it all away and head out cross three and just give it all they got, to hear people who've actually done that and hear what their tales are.
Yeah, no, I agree. Throw it all away is definitely part of the process. I grew up in Northern California in the Bay Area, and then I went to college at UC Santa Barbara, and I started as a computer science major. But I like to say, I fell and I hit my head, and I woke up and I said, "Be an actor." It's not really how it happened, but I did have this kind of epiphany my freshman year. I took, it was a liberal arts college, so we were forced to take electives, and I enjoyed my senior year of high school in the school play and stuff. Had a good time, and I decided I wanted to take, the intro to acting class at UC Santa Barbara. Turned out that UC Santa Barbara has basically a mini conservatory program. They have a BFA degree, a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, that works like a mini conservatory that you might find some places. And so I transferred into the theater program and did this conservatory program. I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in theater, did a lot of acting in college, really loved it. And then, so, we're basically Southern California already. Santa Barbara's moving down the coast of California. And so I just continued and went to Los Angeles after I graduated with a bunch of buddies. And we all, got a place together and started doing the LA thing, which, this was, I shudder to admit, the early 2000s, right around the turn of the millennium. And so things are a lot different there then than they're now. It was pre-digital. I still had black and white headshots, which was the way you did it for decades and decades. And then digital photography came along, and everybody went, "Let's do color. Why were we doing black and white again?" So I literally, was there during that transition, and now things are so much different in New York. It used to be the only places you could go. And now the industry is so topsy-turvy, what with, the world of streaming and all that, and influencers and TikTok. And so people, I think, have much more leeway to stay where they are and sort of make content and garner an audience in that way. But at that time, you really did have to move to either LA or New York or maybe Chicago. So I moved to LA and did a lot of theater, did a lot of regional theater, did a lot of soap operas, and basically did every soap opera you can do that was filming in LA at the time. Did, short films and long films and TV shows and bit parts here and there. So I was that working actor, and I had a day job. I worked in the box office at the Hollywood Bowl for 7 years.
Nice.
And then, sort of the digital revolution was happening, and we were making internet video before there was YouTube, and just trying to get stuff there. I was doing comedy sketches and stuff with comedy teams and doing live improv. And then I ended up meeting a couple of guys, and we started doing the Totally Rad Show, and things really went in a different direction for me.
Awesome. And I know that because of the variety of topics that you talk about, you talk about movies and TV on the Filmcast, but then you also have DLC where you talk about video games. And I know you're an avid video game player from your childhood. Was there ever a decision when you were deciding what you wanted to growing up? Was it a 50-50 between, do I go the theater acting route, or, I really love video games, do I want to potentially go into coding and be a game developer and work on that side of the business? Did you ever that either or?
Well, I actually, like I said, I started college as a computer science major, but I never thought about making video games, strangely. My first job ever at 14 years old was reviewing video games, computer games, for the newspaper. And some folks watching or listening may remember newspapers. They would how people got information way back when. And I got a column, 14 years old, reviewing video games. This was before video games were mainstream. It was before video games were cool. And my nerdy little picture was in the newspaper every week. It was kind of a advertisement to beat me up. It was like, hey, look at that. But that was my first job. So I was very into video games, into the industry, even at a young age, was interacting with the PR companies and interacting with the developers. But what I wanted to do, I really dreamed about doing with my computer science degree, was not the video game industry, but get into special effects, visual effects. Because that was, the late 90s, early 2000s. That was when visual effects were really coming into their own. I actually got an internship at a place called PDI, Pacific Data Images, and this was one of the early visual effects houses. People may remember the Michael Jackson video where morphs into the panther and the black and white where he's morphing into the different faces.
Yes.
This is a big deal back in the 90s, right?
Yes.
You didn't have AI that could just magically do things for you. You had people slaving away to create what we would consider very simplistic effects these days. But I got an internship there, and I really thought I wanted to, I wanted to make movies, but I wanted to do it from the effects side behind a terminal, working for ILM or one of the digital domain or one of the places that I dreamed about. But then, like I said, I got the acting bug a little bit. I was like, hey, maybe I'll be in front of the camera. Maybe I want to be in the movies. And, so I really, at that moment, kind of changed tacks. All full bore. I went 100% into studying acting, and but ultimately ended up having a career that I married the two loves, right? The love of technology and video games and stuff like that, with the love of film and creating and being in front of the camera.
Yeah, I knew from an early age that I too was in love with like television and movies, and that idea of like, okay, well, what do you want to do with that love? And it's like, do I make movies? And I kind of always fell in that camp, like I never really wanted to know like how the sausage were made. So I never wanted to like see the magic trick, but even like I'll enjoy watching like those like quarter digital crews where they do like special effects artists like react, and like you said, like before like CGI like really takes off in the late 90s and like early 2000s, the practical effects, like you said, like visual effects, and it blows my mind that like people were able to think of that. Like when you watch that, you'd be like, all right, how did they do that? And you're just like, well, I have no idea. And then like even like movies from like the 1930s, if we're talking about spooky season and Halloween season, just like using like parallax and ghosts, and like the fact that like in the 30s people were able to think of that is just mind-blowing.
I was very much into that stuff. I was such a kid of the Star Wars generation. I grew up idolizing that, and the things that I loved were seeing the behind the scenes stuff, how it's made, the make of featurettes, and I idolized people like Dennis Murin and Phil Tippett, and those guys that pioneered special effects, right, which is physical stuff. But I loved computers. Right? Dad had a very early computers. We were in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, and in the hotbed of all of that in the late 80s. And so, computers were this magical thing that I taught myself BASIC when I was a kid, and Pascal, dead languages now. But it just felt like this undiscovered country for me. This wild frontier that really was proving to be true in movies as well, that visual effects were going to supplant special effects, practical effects, for the most part, as they have. So I was right there in the center of it, and probably would have made a lot more money if I'd actually stuck with it. But like I said, I ended up sort of loving the forming side a little more, and so that's where my life went.
Yeah, man. So it basically came down to you getting a greater thrill out of, being up on stage performing lines rather than you pulling off a VFX shot. That was, how you made your decision.
You know what it was, honestly? I fell in love with language. I love language. I was introduced to Shakespeare in college and fell in love with performing Shakespeare and doing, plays and films and stuff, and falling in love with great writers and being able to deliver that language. And so I was really taken with that, and I dove fully into it and really devoted myself to sort of getting better. And I also loved doing comedy, and I loved part of my, I think, strange road life is that, I never really picked one thing. I just sort of loved so many things. And I always felt that if I had just stuck to one thing, I may have gone further or been more successful. But I just so many loves and so many interests. I ended up sort of doing a lot of different things all at once.
Right. So we're in the early to mid 2000s. You're in LA working as an actor. How do we meet the Totally Rad crew? How do we meet Dan and Alex? How do you join forces with these guys?
Well, it all comes down to Dungeons and Dragons. I had a friend who was working at a cable station called G4, which I don't know if people remember still, but
yes.
It was sort of an early video game cable network.
RIP
covered video
twice.
Games. Yeah. What's that?
I said RIP twice.
Yeah, RIP twice indeed.
Yeah.
But it, it was sort of the ESPN for video games, I guess you could say. But so, I had a friend of a friend who, was working there, and he wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, and he knew a guy who could be the dungeon master, and he sent an email out to a bunch of dudes who all wanted to play but had never played before. And that was me. I was literally, I said, I was growing up at a time where nerd really meant nerd. It doesn't really mean that anymore. It's kind of cool now to be a nerd. But when I was a kid, I didn't have friends. I had my computer. I had my, fantasy novels. I had comic books. I had movies. I didn't have friends. And so I always wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. I just literally didn't have enough people in my life to make it happen. So I never played. I just always looked at the books and fantasized about playing. So as an adult, I got this email saying, hey, we're putting together a Dungeons & Dragons game, and I leapt at the chance. So I showed up knowing only one guy sort of by extension. I didn't even really know anybody. I only knew the friend of a friend. But I showed up in the room, and Dan Trachtenberg was there, and Alex Albrecht were there, among a few other people. And for whatever reason, Dan, to this day, mentions the fact that I don't remember this at all. I evidently wore a Superman T-shirt that had the S logo on it. I don't remember wearing that, but he said when I was in the room, he knew that we were going to be friends, and we clicked. Like the three of us just really clicked as immediately and wholeheartedly. We just knew we were among like-minded guys. I'm sure you've had that experience before. You meet and you just know 100% they're your people. And we just started hanging out and talking and having these really awesome conversations about all the stuff we loved, like comic books and movies and video games. And at the time, Alex Albrecht, this was, the beginning of podcasting. This was 2005, 2006. And incidentally, I met them on my birthday. The Dungeons and Dragons game happened on my birthday.
Nice.
This was before YouTube was anything, and people were trying to figure out ways to put podcasts out, and video podcasts were just starting. And one of the very first video podcasts was a show called Nation, which Alex Albrecht and Kevin Rose together. They're doing it again now. It's back. It's thriving. It's awesome. But it was one of the very first video podcasts, and it was done on a network called Revision 3, which was an offshoot of that G4 network. Some people that used to work there created this as one of the first internet video platforms, a network of shows that was delivered on the internet, which at that time was kind of a big deal. It's kind of revolutionary. Yeah. Anyway, so Alex was doing Dignation, and we were having these conversations about movies and TV shows and video games and stuff. And we turned to each other and said, wouldn't this be fun to do as a show? These conversations that we're having. And Alex was like, well, I already do one show. We could probably get Revision 3 to pick up a show if we made one. And Dan Trachtenberg, to his credit, was also already doing a video podcast at that time called Geek Drome. And so they were already doing it. And I had felt for a long time like that was something I wanted to do. I auditioned to be a host on G4 a couple of times and really, thought that was something that we should do. And so we put together the show. My roommate and friend from college, Steve Konchelik, we brought him in as the camera operator and tech wizard and editor. It was really cool. We built the show and won a Webby Award that first year, and it garnered a really big following. And we did it for seven years. It's one of the best times of my life. I don't know, it looks like my thing's froze though, doesn't it?
I was just going to ask you about that.
Let me try to see what happens when I do that and that. There we are. No. What's happening?
There we go.
We're back. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. Man, you actually got ahead of me because I was going to mention like how I ended up like finding you guys. Where, like you said, like G4 was on decline. I mean, there was that that classic heyday era of when it was Tech TV before the merger. Because as we all know, mergers only lead to great things. Right. So Tech TV merges with G4, and G4 goes on for a little bit longer. Then around 2010 is how I found you guys, because at that time G4 is turning into, they only have Attack of the Show, they only have X-Play, and then it's, Cops reruns for 8 hours a day. So I'm like, man, I really am looking for, something to fill that gap. And somehow, and this is how I'm finding you guys. Somehow, I must have maybe Googled, like, video game show or something like that, and I found the Destructoid show with Tara and Max. And I had no idea, like, it's funny because I had no idea of Destructoid.com. I had no idea who Jim Sterling was. And if, like, you're in the video game, like, at that time, he is such a figure. But I had no idea of any of that stuff. I was just like, oh my God, there's a show where, like, with a set production value, and they're just talking about video games. This is what I need. And eventually it gets moved over to Revision 3. I'm like, all right, let me go over there and check this out. And that's how I find Anthony Carboni doing Bitejacker. That's how I find Scott Bromley doing, like, Internet Rabbit Hole. And so I'm just, like, going through. And Dignation, I remember, was just like, oh, I remember Alex. I remember him from when he was doing Screensavers. And then I see him there on this other show, the Totally Rad Show. I'm like, okay, well, let me, like, give this a shot. And then I'll tell you that, so for me, the summer of 2010, I was going through some, like, health issues, let's just say, and I was spending a lot of my summer just indoors by myself. And I have to tell you that, like, you guys really, like, got me through that summer. I just binged at whatever you guys must have been doing that show for now. Like, at that point would have been like 3 years. I just watched episode after episode all day long for the entire summer of 2010. Wow. So I would just want to thank you guys for getting me through a rough time in my life right there.
That's really special. I'm so proud to hear that. That's wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for saying.
No, and it almost goes back to, like, how you say, like, especially with adult male friendships, where it's just like, I don't know how we find friends. You end up having friends and it kind of just happens, and you look back and we're like, oh, that happened. And in the same way, it's just like, you guys become like such a, like, everyday part of my life. And it's just like, oh, it just happened by happenstance. Just like all great relationships, and, like, it just happened organically, and, you didn't.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Serendipity.
Yes. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm play for people some clips from the Totally Rad Show, and well, just like a montage of, like, because we've been talking about what this show is, and I want people to realize, like, when they're watching this, they might not get, like, the nuance of it, because it's, they're just guys talking about, video game TV, and it's just like, Yes, but at that time, it like was not happening, and it's just like now it's just like YouTube is just like flooded with that type of content. Before that, it was just like cat videos and like fun like memes before memes was like a term. But so what I'm gonna do is get this ready. And
yeah, that is true. There's so many people doing. All right.
So yeah, just like watching this intro just meant a lot. Even like you said, revision 3, hearing that little poop poop shoot, and like brought me back. And so tell me what feelings and what thoughts come to your head when you like watch this all these years later.
Well, this was one of the best times of my life. I think this is actually the last episode right there. One of the best times of my life, and two of my very best friends in the world to this day, and we had so much fun. I mean, so what you're seeing right now is guys sitting on IKEA stools in one of their garages with a green blanket hung behind us. Nobody was doing green screen when we did green screen. It's hard to even express how different a time was. Right, we had to figure out how to key ourselves out of a green screen because there were no drop-in plugins. I mean, you can literally get a camera that does that for you now, just automatically will key you out of your background. But we were like figuring it out, and it was all just elbows and sweat and love. We had such a great time figuring it out as we go. We did as much wacky stuff as we could think of. And like you said, so many people on YouTube are doing this kind of content now. And it's wild to think that we were kind of among the first to do it. A lot of people are making a lot more money than we did. I'll tell you that nowadays. If we had a YouTube back then to put this stuff on, I wonder. We were just a little bit ahead of the curve, I think. Not to pat ourselves too much on the back, but I think we're a little ahead of the curve on some of this. That's the green screen. So we were on a green screen, obviously, and we would do these are bloopers at the end of the show. We would do backgrounds that we had folks send in backgrounds with our logo. We made our logo available and had folks send in backgrounds, and so we try to make it as audience inclusive as possible. We started the show with, for the first 3 years we started the show with reenactments, movie scenes. We just threw a lot of stuff against the wall and had a great time with it. And I think it resonated with a whole group of people at a time that, like you said, didn't have any content like that to grasp onto.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, just like watching that just takes me back. Even Alex's shirt, Player One, I remember I had that from a website called jinx.com who like specialized in like yeah. So that reminds me,
we were doing sponsorships for Netflix and talking about how you could get a DVD sent to your house in a little sleeve. That was what Netflix wanted you to know their service. All you have to do is rent movies. They'll send them to us. You just send them right back. That was our ad content. It just shows how long ago it was. The world was a different place.
Right? Oh, man. So my first interaction with you, and I tried to find it through Twitter, but of course, Twitter search is always terrible, and it's, just got I couldn't find it. But I said something. It was, I'm not one to reach out, and it's not how I consume content. Like, I just absorb the content. I don't really like participate in like live chats or like tweet at people that often. But for some reason, first time I reached out to you was just like, man, like Squarespace should, or like more people should hire Jeff to like be an announcer. He really sells their Squarespace ads. And I meant that saying a lot of people were just like, oh, we're in an ad read, let me just skip ahead. But I remember like your ad reads were so funny, and I was just like, it's kind of like a bit. So I was just like, I could stay for the ad read. And I was like, I want Squarespace to know that like he's really doing something with these.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that. I always pride in, and still do, take pride in doing not doing it a half-hearted effort on the ad reads.
Gosh. Can you speak to like Well, you've already talked about like how that era was like such like the Wild West of like no one knew what they were doing in terms of like internet video. And
Yeah.
I remember a quote that has stuck with me all these years from like Alex, where when like he was so excited to do the Totally Rad Show because he was like, oh well, we don't have Pete anymore. You know, he came from like G4, like being on like linear TV, and it's like, this is great. Like, we're not competing with anyone. And then someone told him, well, no, you are competing because there's only so many hours in the day. And now, as you see with, like, we're living in assortment of riches in terms of content and entertainment, and it's just impossible to watch every movie, it's impossible to play every game. So the idea of, like, well, yeah, you be on, like, YouTube, you might not be on linear, but you have to, you can't slacken. You have to bring your A game every time because you have to, like I said, so many hours in the day.
Yeah, that's the strange, I guess, is that there are only so many hours in the day, and yet with this kind of content, what you're really competing with is somebody switching away, right? So it's feeding the content, the bottomless well of content, all the time. The folks that are putting out YouTube videos every day, multiple times in a day. It is wild how much content is necessary to kind of feed that beast, which it's a wild thing. But the other side of that coin is that you can survive as a creator. I really love the term content creator, but you can survive as an artist, as a as somebody doing this kind of stuff with a much smaller audience than was ever possible before, because people can support you directly, right? I make my living through the kindness of strangers right now. My living is paid through Patreon and through direct donate for the most part. We still have ads, but back when we were doing the Totally Rad Show, the ad revenue was much, much higher and more available than it is now. And there was a sort of a boon period with podcasting where the ad revenue was really reliable, but that has gone away completely. I mean, there are a bunch of shows at the top of the food chain that are soaking it all up, and those have real famous people in them. But the internet and podcasting and internet video was, for many years when I was doing it at the beginning, a refuge for folks that weren't already famous, right? We were building audiences grassroots, organically. We were building audiences from nothing, and you could do that. I don't think that is as possible now. It is not. People ask me, if I'm going to start a podcast now, what advice would you give me? And I always say, first thing I would do is build a time machine and go back to 2007, because that's the only way to do it. Because now it's all extraordinarily people that are making podcasts and getting all the audience. So, I'm just very lucky that I still have an audience that has known me as long as you have, and has stuck with me and has maintained my ability to make a living.
When did you start to get the feeling that you guys had something special, like in terms like attracting an audience, like, because eventually you guys, after a number of years, you're inside Comic-Con hosting panels in, inside Comic-Con, like San Diego Comic-Con, the biggest thing, like at the right when like nerd culture, like you said, was taking off with the height of like the MU, you guys were able to secure a room inside San Diego Comic-Con and fill it up with Totally Rad Show fans. So I guess, like, can you describe like what that, like, when you started to like see sort of like a groundswell, what that was like? Were you humbled by it, or were you? Can you speak to that?
I mean, the first year that we Comic-Con, I will never forget. We were very nervous, and we got a lot of there weren't really internet folks doing Comic-Con at that point. I don't remember what year it was. Very early, must have been 2008, I'm guessing. But we got a fairly big room at Comic-Con. And I remember we were sort of hanging out that day. I think our panel was later in the afternoon or something, and we were in a kind of holding area. I think we had a bite to eat, and we're going to getting ready for the panel, and off in a holding area. And we had a couple of friends who were going to go and support us and be at the panel, and they I think we got a text or something. We were like, is anybody going to show up? Is there anybody going to even come to this panel? And then we got a text going that said, there's a line around the building. And that moment, I will never forget, just feeling like, what? Are you joking me? And then we walked in from the back of the room, because that's how you have to walk in. And this place was jam-packed with people, and they all cheered when we walked in. And I was like, this is surreal. So that moment will never, I don't know if we'll ever match that. That was a pretty spectacular thing. And we were standing outside, I remember, before that walking in, and massive people were all shuffling in, and this family walked up to us, parents, and their little kid, asked for an autograph or something, and we did it, and he went in to go sit, and the parents lingered there, and they said, I just want to thank you guys, because you're creating content that he loves, that we're proud that he's watching, that's wholesome and shows him good role models and stuff. And like them saying that, I just started crying. And it was really a powerful moment that, oh my gosh, we're actually having kind of a positive impact on people's lives in maybe a small way, but one that meant something to me. So yeah, I mean, it was a pretty special thing.
Yeah. And, unfortunately, like, all good things come to an end. And I remember, like I said, when you guys ended the show, I was working as a cashier at Best Buy at the time. And it was when you guys, because originally you guys did a long form video once a week, and then eventually Monday through Friday schedule. And I just remember, having my phone at the time, because I would work in the mornings where it was really dead. And I just remember, each morning, coming to Best Buy and sorry to former Best Buy bosses that I was slacking off, but it was pretty obvious. But no, I was watching you guys on a morning basis. And then, one day you open the YouTube app and you read the title, or it's been so long I can't remember, but the realization oh, this isn't going to be a part of my daily life anymore. And, for you as well. So, can you talk about the hard decision to, end the Totally Rad Show, and for you guys to move on to other projects?
Yeah. It wasn't entirely our decision. I wish it had been. It was a little bit, things were changing at Revision 3. We kind of saw read the tea leaves, and decided to end it after 7 years. Like I said, we'd won a Webby Award, we won a podcast award. The show was doing really well, and people did, and we loved doing it and didn't want to stop. But it was time, and it was hard. It was very hard. It was. I was a little nervous about what came next. I did a Kickstarter at that time for my next thing, and it was really successful. So that kind of helped bolster my spirits. And I started doing a video game podcast called Weekend Affirmed with Garnett Lee. He and I kind of teamed up and did that show, and that was really fun. So I was kind of already doing another podcast at that time, and was launching my own thing called Newest, Latest, Best, and just kind of parlaying that into continuing to do this kind of stuff. And then I joined the film cast, and so I've been doing that stuff consistently ever since. So there really wasn't a period of not doing it, but I was also in LA and acting and doing pushing that side of the career as much as I could. And but yeah, it was very sad. It was very sad, and like I said, I think it is the best years of my life. I love my family and my kids and where I am now, and I feel very fortunate for the life that I have. But that was really a special time. Those 7 years of doing the Totally Rad Show, it just felt like infinite possibility, and I'll cherish that time for as long as I live.
Yeah, there's a great quote from later season Office episode where say it's Andy who says something. It's how do you know you're in the? I wish someone would write a song about the good old days, and I wish you could know when you're in the good old days, because it's
yeah.
like, you know, you never appreciate it until after it's over. And right now I'm trying to take stock because, like, this is all new to me. Like, for some reason, again, like, this news organization is letting me, like, talk to, like, one of my, like, podcast idols. And, like, under no assumption that I am a reporter or that this is, like, real news, but they're letting me do this. And just, like, am I living in the good old days right now? And should I take stock in all of this? Is, like, the good old days.
Well, it's always good to appreciate it. You know, one of my very favorite in the world is a guy named Steven Erikson. He wrote an amazing fantasy series called As in Book of the Fallen, and in it there is a quote about being a parent, which I find resonant and true to my life, which is parenthood is basically having nostalgia for something as it's happening. And yes. I find that to be very powerful because there's nothing like parenthood to make you realize in the moment how fleeting the moment is. Yeah, I think at that time when you're young, and I was in my early 30s when we were doing that, and you kind of take it for granted. You think life is always going to be like that. And I think as I got older and have had kids and see them change so rapidly and see the world change around them, one does have nostalgia for the moment that's happening. You go, oh God, someday I'm going to look back on this and realize this was the best, seeing my kids be at this age. So for what it's worth, I think that feeling is possible.
No, I agree. So I do have a 6-year-old who's about to turn 7, and we have this pond like right, outside of our house, and there'll be times where like we'll go over there and it'll be like around sunset, it'll be like ducks, and he'll play with them, and it's just like one of those things where like as it's happening, I'm just like, if there isn't heaven and like I could choose what it'd be, I want it to be. I want to live in this moment on repeat, like for eternity. And then of course, like phones nowadays, like get the memories, like, hey, this was 5 years ago. I'm like, I swore it was yesterday. What do you mean that was 5 years ago? Oh my God.
So true.
Goes by fast. But man, Jeff Cannata, I know that you are an expert in podcasts, is that I have all these notes about like how I would want the conversation to go, and you're always one step ahead of me. You're always mentioning like the next thing. I was like, oh man, I was going to transition to that, but he already beat me. But I was going to talk about, again, like your life after the Totally Rad Show and how you've, done a number of different podcasts, and then just to take a break and tell you. So after the Totally Rad Show, I do want to say I was a backer of Newest, Latest, Best.
Thank you.
I was, and I also loved your set. I love the cube, and I'm always
sitting right there.
No way.
It is. I'd pan over there, but it's very cluttered.
Because I'm always like a sucker for, like even like the littlest bit of production value. And I remember when you had like your intro and like the Newest, Latest, Best cube. I'm like, oh man, this is like really cool. This is just like a TV spinoff of the Totally Rad Show. It's just like they gave this side character his own show, and it's Newest, Latest, Best.
Yeah, that's what we were going for.
But ironically, Newest, Latest, Best, it runs a couple episodes, and then I kind of, you kind of like fall out of like my daily life, and I don't really get to hear your opinions on a daily basis anymore. But a year later, it's 2016, and again, just in like the way that I was searching for a video game like type of show like back in the day, 2016, there were 2 movies where I was just like, I really want to hear Jeff's opinion on them. One movie nobody was talking about, and I just wanted to hear somebody talk about it. Then the other movie, I specifically wanted to hear your opinion because during Newest, Latest, Best, you reviewed Man of Steel and had such a take on what Superman is and should be. And when Batman vs. Superman came out, let's just say I had some thoughts and I had some feelings, and I was just like, but like you said, that you are, because you came from a theater background and you have a love of language, I would never be able to articulate why I had a, disdain seems like a hard word, why I disliked Batman v Superman. And I was like, man, I wonder if there's something out there. I wonder what Jeff's doing now. And I ended up finding the Slash Filmcast, and I found your like Superman review because I knew that you would be able to put into words, and I find that out through like many movies over the years where I'm just, I don't read as much as I should to. I probably don't have the vocabulary, so it's really great to have someone else kind of like articulate how I'm feeling, and that's how I found
I hope I
you.
didn't disappoint on that one.
Did not point. But yeah, so that's how I found you, Dave, and Devindra for the Slash Filmcast. The other movie was Darren Aronofsky's. It was a movie that I was talking about, and it's one of those movies where I had such a strong reaction to it. Like, we normally talk about movies, and we'll talk about like, really, laughing out loud for comedies, or like this moment made me cry. I remember watching Mother and just feeling so like angry because like, the metaphor Mother of what it means in like Mother Earth and stuff. There's like all these scenes where like I just felt poor Jennifer Lawrence and all these people are trashing her house. And it was my house. And I was just like, oh, you guys are making me so angry. And I was like, oh, I really want to like hear an in-depth discussion about this movie. So Batman v Superman and Mother of all movies was how I ended up finding you guys, and you guys have been a part of my life ever since.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. And then, yes, I also remember like finding you through Weekend Confirmed and talking about video games. And you know what? I got to ask, how do you find time to play as many video games as you do? Because I only have one child, and he takes up all my time. And I'm looking if I can find, like, I'm definitely into, like, smaller games, like these short experiences. Right now I'm playing Double Fine's Keeper on Xbox. Really enjoying it. Really enjoying it partly because I get to play it with my son, and only because it's like a 5-hour experience tops. Would I love to play Claire Obscure Expedition 33? Yes. Would I ever find the time this year? I don't know. So how do you do it, man? How do you balance parenthood and entertainment and personal time, I guess?
It's difficult. It is difficult. And I'm fortunate in that I get to use that it's my job. So, there's that. But, it is much more difficult now than it has ever been because, being the demands of a parent are hard. And my wife has a real jobby job, and my job is a little more fluid, and so I get to be the one to do a lot of the pickups and drop-offs and moving the kids around from place to place. So, I have to fit in. You just have to fit things in and make it work, as we all do in various ways. And like I said, I'm fortunate in that, I get to say I got to do this for work a little bit, but you do what you can.
You do it. Yeah. At the top of this pod, I said, you were a man of many hats. You've done, acting, you've done online video, you've done podcasting. But then I also want to change this graphic here because, Jeff Cannata, you are a published author in a way for a moment in time. You know what? I would pull up a picture of your book, but why do that? Have the physical copy right here.
Hey,
right?
I appreciate that.
Best summed up. So funny story is that I was listening to like the podcast one day, and you were telling the story, and I'll let you tell it in a second. Because we talked to a number of authors in this studio as well, and I think, well, I'll let you tell it right now. What was your experience putting this book together? Best summed up.
Well, you haven't mentioned the fact that it's a book of limericks, so it's
of course
it's an odd book in and of itself. The Filmcast is a show where I review movies, as you've mentioned, with Dave and Devindra, and as a joke one time, well, Dave came in having been gone for a few weeks years ago, and said, I saw a bunch of things. I'm going to talk about them by doing a limerick for each one. And I thought that was awesome. I basically stole it from him, and I said, you know what? From now on, there's going to be a limerick in every episode. And he laughed. And I didn't even mean that sincerely. I just thought it was going to be a goofy bit. And so the next week I came in with a limerick about the movie. And then the next week after that, I came in with a limerick about the movie. And then I just didn't stop. And people ended up starting to really anticipate them and enjoy them. And so I kept writing limericks. And eventually I got on Cameo.com, the app, cameo.com/Jeff Cannata. You can get your own limerick written by me, delivered by me via video, by going there if you like. And people started buying limericks from me. And so I just kept making more and more limericks, having fun with it. As I said, I love language. I love writing. And this company came to me, this publisher, defunct, but came to me and said, hey, we'd love to publish a book of your limericks. And I thought, that sounds cool. It feels like work I've already done. It seems like the easiest gig I've ever gotten. You're telling me you're going to just take all the limericks I've already written and put them in a book, and that's it? Easy. Let me do it. Well, it turns out that when I started looking over the limericks, I realized, these weren't really written for a book. They were written for the context of doing it on the podcast and everybody already knowing what movie it was. And the publisher was, hey, this would be fun to do as a quiz book. So you read the limerick and you try to figure out what movie it was, which basically necessitated me rewriting all of them. So I went through, and it turned out to be a pretty laborious process of writing 200 plus limericks about movies, and then writing clues for all of them. But I'm really proud of the book. And unfortunately, the publisher, had problems. And I never got paid for any of the book, not a cent, even though they sold a lot of them. But it's a different story. So I'm proud that it exists. You get to hold one in your hand. I'm proud that my parents get to hold them in their hand. And I think it looks great. It has this kind of cool, as you saw, gold foil cover. And the book is great. And I'm proud of it. Win-win for me. Win-lose, but, ultimately win.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool.
No. And what's fun is that I love the limericks. I love it's, as like a lot of fans would say, it's like one of the highlights of each episode. But, and like watching the Totally Rad Show clip, as used to do the game shows like Media Mashup or the title fights, I always feel so dumb when these happen. Like especially with this book where it's just like, I've listened to these episodes, I've heard some of these like limericks before, and I can't put it together. And I'm like on like, what you would call like a level 1 or 2 quiz. And I'm just like, I have no idea what this movie is. I'm just one big dum-dum. But
well, hopefully they bring you a little joy regardless.
Yes, yeah. But since we're in this book club mode, if you want to take a moment and just tell people what is a book that you're currently reading, and then after you're done, if you want to ask me what I'm currently reading, we do that.
Sure. As I said, I do a book club podcast on my YouTube channel with Lana Bashinsky, a good friend and wonderful personality as well. She and I do a book club, and we are currently working our way through a 10-novel series. I mentioned it before, Steven Erickson's The Malazan Book of the Fallen. And we are on book 10, the final book. It's called The Crippled God. I have it right over there. And it's incredible. It's the best fantasy book series I've ever read. But alongside, I'm also listening to the audiobook of Bernard Cornwell's The Warlord King, which is kind of a retelling of Arthurian legend. Very good. I just finished The Tainted Cup, which won the Hugo Award for Best Science Fiction or Fantasy Book. I'm an avid reader, love reading. I wish more people read. I'm writing my own novel right now. So I said I love language, I love words, and I wish more people did. What are you reading?
Well, Jeff, I guess you could say that the book that I'm currently reading could be best summed up in the form of a limerick. All right. A career. First off, I will say that I want to say you'll probably be in the ballpark as far as guessing what the book is. I would say on a scale of 1 to 5, we'll put this at a level 2. Let's put it there. All right. A career that is beyond compare, with decades in different director chairs. For me, it was light, growing up with Nick at Night, watching story of tabs and cab fares.
Whoa. Bar tabs and cab. Is it? It's a book.
Mm-hmm.
That you're reading about bar tabs and cab fares from Nick at Night.
Mm-hmm.
I'm stumped. You got me.
The autobiography of James Burrows, director of Cheers and Taxi, bar tabs and cab fares.
Oh, nice. That's great.
Thank you. I'm so proud of that.
I'm sure that's a fascinating book. What a life he's led.
Well, so for me, you talk about like how you wish people read more. For me, I really have a hard time reading fiction, but I will devour nonfiction, especially in regards to like the history of television and behind the scenes stuff. Like, growing up watching like all these classic sitcoms, to hear the behind the scenes stories of like from the actors or the writers and the people that put it together, that would be like catnip for me. And I guess for fiction, I kind of lean on that. There's an episode of Seinfeld where Costanza is just like, I can't read a book when the voice I hear in my head is my own. I can't get lost in this like
great,
That's what I honestly should try to do. And yeah, the amount of like money that goes into like podcasts and like stories and like sound effects and stuff. I remember like HBO had like a Batman Caped Crusader audio serial series or something, and they went the action like putting in the rain in the background and like the ambiance of like Gotham City and like
there's a lot of that. You can find a lot of that.
Yeah. And that's definitely
I've
on
done a couple of audiobooks. Well, I narrated a couple of, that I didn't write.
Really?
Yeah. I did called Traveling in Space by Stephen Paul Leva. And the other one is Shadows and Light, I believe it's called. Ooh, I stumped myself. I feel very guilty. Anyway, you can search for me on audible.com and find books I narrated as well. Did a bunch of voices.
Man. Like I said, a man of many hats. Like I said, Jeff Cannata, 2 N's and 1 T. As always, if you're searching. So one of the reasons that I wanted to interview you at this current time is, as you said, your, best friend, Dan Trachtenberg, co-host of Totally Rad Show, has, gone off to Hollywood and made himself a high-profile director. And he has a movie coming out, Predator Badlands. And I guess first off, have you seen the movie yet?
I have. I saw an early cut. Yes.
Okay. I won't ask for any spoilers. I only asked because I was going to show B-roll of the trailer, and I know how you are about the salt. I know Jeff Cannata does not like the trailer before a movie; he likes to go in fresh.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So I did not want to be.
I can make an exception. I have seen the movie.
Okay, I did not want to be the one to spoil the experience. So I
appreciate the consideration.
But no, tell me, can you? Again, you're such a you have a way with like words and language. But are there words to to describe what it's like to see a person that you hung out for a number of years, like one of your closest friends, like achieve his dream, and like how like proud you must be for him?
It's yes, it's beyond words. It's spectacular, and to see how much respect he's garnering from his peers, people that we've all looked up to. I mean, it's a who's who of incredible directors in Hollywood. There he is, Dan himself, who praised his work, and he's right on the cusp of really getting into a spectacular. The movie's amazing. He's also directed Prey and Cloverfield Lane, as well as a number of Vision pilots and other things. But this, I think this is going to catapult him into that next echelon, because I don't know any other person in life that I've ever met that is more suited to the thing they do for a living than Dan Trachtenberg is to direct. He was to do it, and every moment of his existence is brought him to this place, and goodly so. He's a great human being and an incredible director, and I'm just so happy to see the world get to share in his talent. It's awesome.
Man. God, I can't wait to watch it. My only regret is that I was never able to buy Totally Rad Show merch, because I do love every now and like when 10 Cloverfield Lane came out and you guys would retweet a picture of like someone going to the theater with their Totally Rad Show shirt years later. That must be like humbling as well to see that.
Yeah, Dan just had he had a pretty surreal moment. You talk about being at Comic-Con. Folks that may not have been to Con in San Diego may not know there is one place in Comic-Con. It's called Hall H. It's the biggest venue there, massive. It holds over 2,000 people. We would always go there. We went to Comic-Con to see the big reveals of the big movies, and then cover them on the Totally Rad Show. So our panel was not in there. There's just a amount of people. We would never have drawn that. Our panel was for, a few hundred people, but 2,000 in Hall H. Well, Dan with Predator Badlands just headlined Hall H. And that to me was like, wow, we used to sit, and he got to say that on stage. He got to stand on stage and say, when we were doing the Totally Rad Show, we used to sit right back there and dream about that. And now he's doing it. So it's pretty wonderful.
Yeah. Gosh, how do I want to go? Where do I want to go next? Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes and there's a lot of chicken scratch. Man, so I got you for a couple minutes because I know you have a heart out in.
Just gotta go pick up kids.
I was literally yesterday for picking up my kid because I did not abide by the heart out, and my wife yelled at me for it, deservedly so. Sorry, wifey. So I guess to entice people to go check out your other podcasts, I figure we could do this like rapid fire, maybe like a quick around the horn, like buy or sell on a couple of topics that you cover on DLC, your video game podcast, and on the Fest, where we talk about like movies and TV shows. Sure. So I'm going to say a statement, and I want you to ask you if you are buying or selling this statement. Okay. So first I'll start off with TV. Apple TV or Apple Originals is the new HBO. Are you buying or selling that notion?
Buying. I'll buy that. I think there's been misses with Apple TV, but I like a number of shows. I think become my sort of second stop when I do the tour of the apps. When I sit down to find something to watch, I think Apple TV tends to be my second stop. So I think, I'm going to buy that.
Yeah, and a longer conversation could be had of what Apple's like long-term plans are, because they have the forever the Scrooge McDuck vault of money that they could just throw like sci-fi shows like Foundation, where you look at it and it just rivals anything that you've ever seen on like the big screen, and and then HBO and like Warner Brothers with their unfortunate merger after merger, and how much that brand has had to endure. But yeah, I would also buy that statement.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, for video games, and this is one I would say is a hot take, maybe. Well, maybe not after recent news, but is video game becoming an elitist hobby?
Oh, I mean, to say I'm buying that, I feel like endorsement that I don't want to give. I don't like the notion, but I do feel like, you know what? I'm going to sell that, because video gaming is as democratized as it has ever been, and there's more people playing video games, even if they don't call themselves video gamers, because phones and mobile are so ubiquitous, and people are, you see people on Candy Crush and what have you, and they're playing video games, even if they don't want to admit it. I think, unfortunately, the case is that the thing that I've done my whole life in regard to video games is getting farther and farther from the mass audience, which is play a lot of big AAA games all year. And that's because it's become more and more expensive and more difficult for folks to do it, and the market has been splintered by that. So I unfortunately, I think I'll have to sell on that statement.
And it's definitely a hard one, because you like you said, it's almost just like that old like, what is a computer versus like what's a game? Because it's just like, like you said, like people wouldn't consider themselves gamers, but my wife plays, like, I don't know if it's Candy Crush, but it's one of those endless jewel type games, and she doesn't consider herself a gamer. And like Fortnite is free, and it has Minecraft is free. At the same time, I've had like each console generation, and it just baffles me that we are 5 years into this console generation and the prices are going up. And it's just like, this was the time, like, I have this list on my phone of all these games that I, wanted to play. And some of them, I held off on, God of War Ragnarok and Spider Morales. And even though they're on PlayStation 4, they are PlayStation 5 and probably run poorly on PS4. And I was like, well, I'll just wait. I'll wait until the price goes down. And here we are 5 years, and I'm honestly wondering, I'm like, is this my lost generation? Am I ever going to play any of these games? Should I, just download the, PS4 version of Miles? And, it really is, scaring me because, I remember going to, like, pawn shops as a kid, like, getting, like, a Sega Game Gear with, like, 10 games for, like, $50. And, I just don't think that's happening anymore. And sadly, like, yeah. So, unfortunately, since you go sell, I will take the pessimistic route and go buy. So, movies, is superhero fatigue a real thing?
In me or in the world? I think I have to buy that for the greater world. I think I'm experiencing it quite so much, but I do think, I think it's. We have to define our terms, right? But I believe that superhero fatigue comes from perhaps too many superhero movies that didn't hit the high watermark of quality. I think there would be no superhero fatigue if we just kept getting home runs. But unfortunately, the glut of movies has not been also exceptional. And TV shows and the Disney Plus ification of the Marvel universe and all that stuff, I think that the quality level dipped, and that led to the fatigue that we're, I think, undoubtedly seeing.
Yeah, I agree. Like in video game terms, there's always this term of I rolled credits on the game. I felt like as a collective society, when we all watched Endgame, it was like, all right, we rolled credits, and
on the MCU, yeah,
and it was like we're kind of just like in this like afterglow of just like, well, what do we do now? And like nothing's quite capturing it as well.
Everything else has been a post-credit scene.
Yeah, unfortunately. So yeah, but I will sell that idea just because, like you said, now that maybe we realize the mistakes of putting out too many TV shows and devaluing our like silver screen properties, and let's not date things before we have like a solid story or a solid cast or just an idea of what we want to do. I feel like lessons are being learned. The only thing I wonder is that, will, video game or will a different like IP gold rush take over, in the same way that
it's happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Video games are that. Yeah.
Speaking of, I know you wouldn't be able to tell me any details, but it really breaks my heart that Dan Trachtenberg could not direct the Uncharted movie. And I so wonder what that movie could have been like. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. In case people didn't know, Dan Trachtenberg could have directed one of the most cinematic games and one of my, college favorites, the Uncharted series for PlayStation.
Yeah. I think it would have been a very different movie than the one that was released. I'll just say that.
Indeed. And then reboot fatigue is real. Buying or selling?
I think I am selling. I don't think we've hit peak reboot yet, either in video games or in movies. I think still the churn of sure things from the people that fund these projects will result in many, many more reboots, known IP franchises, instead of taking any chances. So I think we're far. Maybe it will be to the detriment of the entire industry, but it's still, I think, going to be happening a lot.
Yeah. I'm going to flip my answer and say that I'm selling the idea. I'll buy the idea, but I'll sell it when it comes to Lego sequels, and especially within the TV field, because I think it's like you said, where it's just like we all have the memories of like, these television characters, and we want to see that thing again. But the only problem is they're 20 to 30 years older, and they're moving a little. The lines aren't as quick. It kind of doesn't make sense for someone of that age to do that thing. And I feel like those wheels are kind of grinding to a halt in the TV field at least, and Lego sequels in movies maybe. So I will sell that. And then the final buy and sell. I mean, of course, corporate consolidation is great for everyone, and then there are no downsides. Buy. No, sell, of course.
Yeah, that's sell.
I mean, and that goes for everything we've talked about. That goes if you're following the new in the video game thing with Xbox. If you're looking at the Warner Brothers be the table, yeah, it's they always promise the best, but it doesn't end up, and far too many people lose jobs. I have a niece who was also who loves art and was thinking about getting into video game development. And I was just like, oh, no, you don't understand. I read about video game studio closing every other week and layoffs, massive layoffs. I was like, please find somewhere else to share your hobby world.
It's so sad. It's sad to have to discourage that. I think that's really sad to be able to encourage kids to follow their dreams,
Yeah, and it's sad for the artists because it's like you want them to put out something, but then the feel of like, well, if this doesn't hit, that's the end of it, and it affects the art that we put out into the world. Real quick, before I let you go, wrap up, I just want to tell you how much this means to me. Again, like TV is my preferred media of choice. It means the most to me. And a lot of people talk about like peak TV or the golden age of TV. The golden age. The Game of Thrones, the Mad and the Breaking Bad, and then peak TV when we've all these streamers. But I feel very fortunate to have come of age during the '90s, where I felt like to me that is the golden age because it was the last time that we all sat down and watched something. And it's harder to younger coworkers that I have that. Before the internet, TV shows were like our window into the world, and that special relationship of like family sitcoms of like watching characters grow and inviting them into your house for every night on Tuesday night, you could trust that they'll be there and you'll see these kids grow. And it was like movies were like a one night stand, was like a long-term relationship, and the sadness in seeing like TV shows end away. And, we don't really have that anymore. And when I think about, well, what is the closest thing we have to that? And it's the answer I came up with, well, it's podcasters and people like you, Jeff Cannata, because I invite you into my house every week now. And, like I said, like you getting me through like really tough time, and, I can put you on as I'm walking to my kid from day camp, but you've also been there when I, was employed, and, you're there every week, just in the same way that those old, like, sitcom characters that I used to invite into my house every week are. But now, that baton's been passed on to you, and I just wanted to, there's terms, the vocal majority and the vocal minority and the silent majority. And I just want you to know that for a lot of people that, have the luxury of being able to tell you this, I just want to say thank you for doing what you do. And, even if you're me and maybe you think that, if you're ever down on yourself, or maybe like, oh, I wish I would have been able to do this or I would have been able to do like this as a host. I always feel like the connection and the happiness that you're able to give your listeners is something that I'm sure you cherish, but I just want to remind you, like, you always never devalue that, because I feel like that's more important than like any, celebrity status is. And yeah, that's my lumbling way of saying thank you for being a part of my life for these past 15 years, man.
I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Thank you.
It means a lot. It's not something I take for granted at all. It is a privilege to, be welcomed into people's ears. So thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, I hope after the podcast that a number of new listeners will join the fray and, experience what I've been experiencing all this time. But Jeff Cannata, no problem, man. So one last, like, like I said, you're the expert. Plug yourself, man. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find all my shows anywhere you podcasts. Like Scott said, I do a number of shows. The Filmcast, talking about movies and TV shows. DLC, which you can find at dlcpod.com. I do a comedy science show where you can learn something and laugh along the way. It's called We Have Concerns. And I do the book club, which is on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/CannataJeff. So lots of places to find me, lots of topics I discuss, and I hope you'll give it a shot if you're interested in any of those topics.
All right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been truly an honor and a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you. The pleasure's been mine. Thank you.
All right. And from the WECT Digital Studio, this is Scott Pachilis signing off.